Saya menyampaikan dalam bahasa Inggris ya Bapak Ibu semua dan teman-teman mahasiswa. So we are really pleased to welcome Prof. Kaveh Madani. He is the director of United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment and Health, coming from Canada. And also, of course, this will not happen if we don't have any what we call, with the help of RRI Indonesia, Radio Republik Indonesia, so who has been very generous to connect IPB with UNU-INWEH. So this is a really prestigious moment, and we are really happy to welcome all of you to IPB University. And we have already had fruitful discussions from in the morning, and we continue now with the guest lecture. And here, together with us, all of the students coming from various faculties have already joined in person at this room, and also we have also quite a lot of participants online. So thank you very much for your participation. So I would like to introduce Prof. Kaveh Madani. So at this moment, he will deliver a lecture on global water bankruptcy. This is a really important topic. And this is very much related to the role of United Nations University as a think tank that bridge science into policy. So this really important role that how we can enhance research and education and then translate it into policy, and this can bring more impact to the society. And yeah, let me introduce Prof. Kaveh Madani. He graduated from University of California, Davis, PhD in civil and environmental engineering. And his academic roles as a former professor at Imperial College London, and then assistant professor at the University of Central Florida. And he served also a role at the government level as a deputy head of Iran's Department of Environment, and then chief of Iran's delegation in UN climate negotiation. And of course, he has been working on the science and research and educations, and he has been awarded as a listed in foreign policy's top 100 global thinkers, and recipient of multiple awards for research, education, and public service. It's really very prestigious awards. And areas of expertise on water, energy, food nexus, environmental policy and governance, systems modeling and game theory applications, and science diplomacy and sustainability transitions. So without further ado, I would like to invite Prof. Kaveh Madani to deliver his speech.
Thank you so much for the generous and kind introduction, and thank you. To bridge the gap between science and policy. For those of you who might not be familiar with the United Nations University, United Nations University is one of the UN agencies known as its scientific arm and academic arm, or its think tank, with the mission of bringing the science to the policy circles and helping the member states address their issues through the state-of-the-art science. And we are also doing a lot of capacity building and postgraduate education mainly. The Institute data, this is a wrong title, I'm no longer at Yale. So give me a second, I want to make sure I have the right. It's a little embarrassing. Okay, I redo, and now you know why I'm talking about the United Nations University. Apologies for that. So the United Nations University has 10 institutes, 2 programs, and 1 center around the world. And one of those is headquartered in Canada, and I'm in charge of that one. And it's focused on water, environment, and health. So the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health, or UNU-INWEH, for nearly 33 decades has been working on a broad spectrum of things. It's known as the UN's water think tank. But water, and traditionally water has been the entry point for us in dealing with a range of problems related to environment and health and water, including agriculture, including public health. And you can imagine, we are dealing with a broad spectrum of topics and the diverse range of problems that the member states have. We have the pleasure of working with a lot of scientists around the world to try to essentially use the best science available to address the problems. And the reason I'm in Indonesia today and yesterday is that as a part of the effort that we have, one of our recent initiatives, the Global Media Academy, we are working with the media family around the world, including broadcasting unions, through a partnership that we have with HEC Montreal, a famous institute in Montreal, and our colleague, Professor Javad Motagi, on essentially raising the profile of water, environment, and health through the media around the world. And we have had the pleasure of working with RRI, Radio Republik Indonesia, and that is the champion and the leading voice, I would say now, for the broadcasters in the Asia Pacific region. And RRI, as of yesterday, became the secretariat and the focal point of the Global Media Academy for the Asia Pacific region, and would contribute to the efforts of working with the broadcasters and journalists and media family in the Asia Pacific region and beyond. And today I have the pleasure of being here. But what I'm going to talk about today is the issue of global water bankruptcy. And you would hear me talking about this a lot today. But before we proceed, let me tell you what I mean by global water bankruptcy. I believe that you all have heard about water crisis. That's a term that we have been using for a long time. It's a term that means something is wrong, something is accurate, like it's wrong enough to get our attention and so we bring all our acts together to address something urgently. It reminds me of something that is extremely urgent and it requires attention. But if you look at the we know that it has happened and we have to act. But the reality is that this is not happening because we have been using this term for a long time. Media has lost sensitivity to it. Society has lost its sensitivity to it. And at the same time, we talk about a lot of crises. We say there is a food crisis, there is a water crisis, there is an economic crisis, there is a health crisis, there is a social crisis, there is, and if you talk about so many crises, then that's what you get. No attention because people are simply, people have a limited bandwidth to pay attention to matters. And I'm a firm believer that we have actually passed the stage of the crisis in which we had the chance to mitigate a lot of things. I think when the crisis happens, there's a wildfire, there's a fire. So you get all the acts together to address the issue and mitigate the issue. And at the time of the crisis, you still have a chance to mitigate the problem. But once the crisis is over, the chance of mitigating everything is over, and you have to combine your mitigation efforts with your adaptation efforts. So today you will hear from me why I argue that that the stage of water crisis is over and the world is already in a water bankruptcy mode, and it's better that we admit that we are in that stage. But before we proceed, let's look at the stage of the world water resources, what's happening around the world. So the first thing we gotta pay attention to is how much water we are using. If we adjust the size of countries according to their water use, the amount of water they're using, this is what we see. What is striking about this map? The big continent of Africa is almost not there. And if you look at South America, you see the same situation. If you look at East Asia, it's expanded or inflated. Some other countries in the Middle East and North Africa are also inflated. In North America, in particular, United States is inflated. And what you see here is that the state of the water use doesn't necessarily match the state of water availability in these countries. So essentially, water use does not really match the water budget. This doesn't, and then what you see here is that water use might be actually lower than the budget available in certain countries because they do not have the economic resources needed to tap into their water resources. Africa is a good example of that, South America as well. You have a lot of wet regions, but still people are struggling to fetch water, and everywhere is green, but women and children have to walk for kilometers to fetch water. So what we see in these places is the state of economic water scarcity. Water is available, but the economic resources are not. And then on the other hand, you have some places where they're overusing their resources because they were rich enough to implement their infrastructure and build their infrastructure, build dams, implement water transfer projects, and take more water out of the system that they could afford. So they're using their fossil resources, and as a result, they're having unsustainable water use. If you look at the domestic water use, this is an important thing because domestic water use is also reflective of the state, the development stage, and once systems become developed, and look at the expansion of the European countries compared to the previous one. Domestic water use is a reflection of the quality of life, quality of sanitation, and then quality of, I would say, kind of wastefulness when it comes to water use and your attitude toward water. So you see, again, North America is being big. South America is doing better than Africa. Australia being bigger than the previous map, and you see some level of expansion, and of course, population plays a role here, but the quality of life is also reflected in this. And if you don't provide people with water, then we are affecting their health. We still have, again, as I said, women and children being impacted by water scarcity because they lose their school time for fetching water. We have different impacts on children and women, but the general health and sanitation problems would exist in the societies regardless. Men are also affected negatively by this. And when it comes to the water crisis, this is what the world is mostly focused on. The development agenda has been mostly focused on this, talking about the wash problems and providing toilets and sanitation, which is extremely important, but that's not the full story. If you look at industrial water use, that's another important measure here. What we see is that the rich countries are using their water they have a high industrial water use, and they use water in a sector that produces more dollars than the other sectors. They are able to produce industrial products and sell these industrial products to the countries that are in need of these products. The return on investment here is very high. And you look again, a further expansion of North America, a further expansion of the European countries. Not because, for example, Europe, we couldn't see much of water use before, not because, or even domestic water use before, not because they're not water rich, because they know how to spend their water. The trade wars that are going on as the result of the new policies of the President of the United States is reminding us about what's happening. Each countries are doing trades all the time, and this was an opportunity for countries to revisit their trade policies, or even ask themselves, where do we export our goods? Where do we export our products? And and then maybe we need to change the destinations or the origin of the products that we export or import. But this is an important thing, because with every product that you export or import, you export drops of water and you import drops of water. You are in a game of embedded water trade or a virtual water trade. And now look at this map, agricultural water use, and see the difference. What happened to North America? What happened to Canada? What happened, and then what happened to East Asia? Why? Because here we use a lot of our water for producing food. Not that, and then compare this with the other map. And what you learn here is that, yes, food is important, and it is important to produce food, but the Europeans are not doing it. The Canadians are not doing it as much as we are doing it. Why? Or the Asians are doing it. Why? Because there is a competitive advantage there. It's much better to export industrial goods and import food. Food is cheap, much cheaper than industrial goods. And then you gain more dollars. And so what happens is that we have these countries essentially exporting their water and their cheap labor to the rest of the world. Food remains cheap as the main product of the water sector. 70% of the water, on average, in total, 70% of the world's water goes into the agricultural sector. And the countries that and most of this water is in the hands of poor farmers who farm for subsistence, farmers who farm for producing food to eat, to feed their family, and water for them is their livelihood. And governments in many of these countries cannot stop the farmers from using water, even if that water is fossil water, even if that's a water that is not going to be replenished groundwater, let's say in India or China or other places, because people need to make a living. And unless you provide a solution for these people, then you cannot change their habits. And that's why we talk about alternative forms of livelihood. That's why we talk about industrialization. That's why we talk about the diversification of water use and diversification of the economy. And if we don't do that, there is no solution. You can go and nag and you can criticize, but you don't offer a practical solution. Because at the end of the day, governments should provide income to these people. And governments, no matter where you are in the world, no matter if you're in the global north or a global south, in a rich country or as a poor country, unemployment is extremely dangerous when it comes to national security, and governments smartly understand that this danger. Good or bad, unemployment is more dangerous to national, when it comes to national security than environmental issues. Environmental issues are normally long-term, considered long-term issues, and people, need to feed their families, and you cannot talk to starving children or starving populations about the future generations or what happens next or the end of the century. Right now, as a result of all of this, we have the issue of a lot of people living in areas that are dealing with water scarcity around the world. A physical water scarcity in many cases. If you look at, for example, the Middle East or North Africa, these are the places that infrastructure development has not been an issue. The oil money has been there, investments have been made. They're facing a different type of water scarcity, not economic water scarcity, physical water scarcity. There's no longer more water to take advantage of. There's no more water to take out of the system, and if they're using their groundwater, they're facing declining levels of groundwater because they're taking more water than what's the sustainable rate. North Africa, same thing, but Australia, California, Mexico, and so on, and parts of China, India, and so on. So I just explained this. I told you that we use water for food, and this remains a big thing. We use water to produce meat. We use water to produce cereals. So water is a strategic resource. Food is a strategic resource. Our understanding of food security has changed after the invasion of Ukraine, after the trade wars of the United States. So this is extremely important, and then every country should revisit and understand the water flows, the virtual flows, not because at the end of the day, you can't make decisions based on virtual water flows. That's wrong. You cannot make those decisions. The decisions you make about import and export should be connected to everything else, labor, your competitive advantages, what resources you have, where you're good at, and so on. But it is important to understand also what you're strategically exporting. On top of food, we need water for energy production, and as we go forward, essentially the energy sector is becoming thirstier, and then now we have the new sector created by the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence, data centers, and so on, they're extremely thirsty. They're thirsty for cooling, but they're thirsty because they also are demanding energy from us, and producing energy, no matter what source you use, requires water. Some are more water intensive than others, like biofuels or hydropower. The other ones are also requiring water, and this is another challenge that we have to deal with. Now, if you look at the world around us and what's happening around us, then we see that the situation, you cannot have physical water scarcity forever. Everything is changing. The landscapes are changing. Our wetlands are going dry. They're drying out. The land use is changing around the world. Coastal areas are being impacted. Coastal zones are being impacted. You have saltwater intrusion. The development that you have had around the world is impacting these wetlands and these big lakes. And the trend you see is very much similar. Many of you have heard or know about the stories of the Aral Sea, but the Aral syndrome is replicating itself around the world. So we have the RLC replicated in the United States, salt lakes, but also the Dead Sea in the Middle East, the Urumia Lake, and so on. So this issue is an ongoing issue that is being repeated in many places. And if you look at some of the cities face their, day zero, the situation where water was close, their reservoirs no longer had water, and the cities are normally the last user groups that or domestic water users, urban populations are the last ones who experience the water shortage, because most governments try to take water away from other uses and keep the urban populations happy. That's where the cost of water shortage is higher. And if the reservoirs are drying up, then the situation is crazy. You have the migration, you have kids that are being impacted, you have all these injustice issues that are created by the lack of water. The people who spend their lives, a lot of their time for fetching water access remains limited. We remain unable to provide clean water, toilet to people. You remember during COVID-19, we started advertising or promoting wash your hands, keep your, and stay at home and so on. But the reality of the world was not the reality that the global north scientists were imagining, right? Because many places in the world, we don't have toilets. People don't have access to tap water to wash their hands. So immediately we had to inform the UN system and those scientists, wait a minute, most people, so many people on this planet don't have those privileges that you take for granted. And then stay at home. What are you talking about? Many people don't have shelters to stay at home. So if they go to their slums, actually, that's where they're more exposed, and the chance of getting COVID, contracting COVID is high. We have farmers that are being impacted. We have farmers that are being affected and going bankrupt as the result of this situation, because they farm till the last minute, because lack of water means loss of livelihood. We have farmers who are committing suicide around the world as the result of this situation. To me, this is not any longer a water crisis, because a lot of these problems are irreversible. There is no way we can address these issues in our lifetime in a foreseeable future. We cannot, reverse the trends of land subsidence that we have had in Jakarta. Land subsidence has been there, and it is already there. So even the aquifers have been impacted. The aquifer storage capacity has been impacted. Groundwater levels are not easy to restore. Lakes and wetlands are not easy to restore. We have seen these problems in many places. This is Lake Urumia in my country, Iran, which was once one of the largest hypersaline lakes in the world, and largest in the region. Please mute your microphones. So this has become a major issue, and a lot of efforts have been put into restoring this lake, but that's a mission impossible, because if you want to do that, that means you have to stop upstream farming. You have to let the water that you have stored behind the reservoirs flow into this. And Iran is not the only country that has failed in restoring this. We have seen also the similar problem in the United States. And unless you provide alternative modes of livelihood to the people and alternative ways of using water that are more economically advantaged, feasible, then it's mission impossible. And of course, as a result of this, we are impacting the ecosystem. The ecosystem cannot be restored, and this problem goes on and on and on. Now, it's not only this. Now we have the issue of sand and dust storms A lot of these wetlands are becoming, and the dry soil, the desertification, is creating these hot spots around the world, and the world is being exposed. Like a lot of countries did not have sand and dust storms, but this is expanding around the world. The dust belt width is expanding around the world. We have dust particles that travel all the way from Africa to North America. We have dust particles that travel around the world. They're not stopped by borders. No one checks their passports and nationality. They move around, and as a result of this, a lot of people are being exposed. Aviation industry is being impacted. Energy sector is being impacted. We have dust particles sitting on the grids, and then then you have power outage. If you have a power outage, then water utilities stop functioning, treatment plants stop functioning, then you have water outage. And if and then there's a health crisis, no one can go out in the street, you have to shut down the cities, lots of millions of dollars of loss per year, and these are transboundary problems. This come from another region. These come from another region that you have no control over. You cannot even do anything about it. And now we have wars being added to this, and not only the dust particles are traveling, but also the chemicals left from so all the particles left from explosions and so on, traveling all the way, exposing people, poisoning people, and so on. And sometimes these are not being, don't talk about these because we don't hear much about them, because they're not the problems of the global north. They're still the problems of the global south. And it takes some time before this lag is gone and the rest of the world is reacting. On top of all this, we have the issue of climate change, and that's real, and we keep talking about it. But climate change is not the cause of all these problems. Cause of all these problems are bad management. The house is already on fire, and we are adding fuel to it, and we are making the situation worse. And that climate change means more extremes, more floods, more droughts, more hurricanes, more fires and wildfires and so on. And then it also means more evapotranspiration, increased water demand, less rain and less precipitation in some places, change of the formation of precipitation from snow to rain, less snow, lower levels of snowpack, less capacity of natural capacity to store water, more melting of glaciers and more problems. And guess what? We design our system based on the stationary assumption that the world would look like what we had experienced, and now the world is changing, and we are not ready for this situation. Yes, so when we look at the problem, we keep talking and blaming a lot of these problems. I have seen a lot of articles about some of these, for example, lakes that I mentioned in some Western media, claiming that these are the result of climate change, but they're not. They're mainly the result of bad management, land use change patterns, water use change patterns in the region. But climate change is certainly changing this mix. And if you look at this, for example, animation, it's showing us what the major driver was. Is it natural variability, or human activity, or climate change? So we have all these forces at play, and the world that we are dealing with is changing. So we have people talking about this. A lot of people talk about water shortage being the world number one risk. These were the predictions. These were a lot of people in the World Economic Forum and other places talked about this and predicted this or projected this. But I mean, projections are wrong. No one could see a pandemic coming. No one could see that the wars at this scale would come, and the world goes backward and still violates international law and prefers wars and conflicts to peace. But water is also a contributor to this issue. Water is, that for example, not long ago, the two countries in Asia were fighting, India and Pakistan, and water was one of the problems there. Transboundary conflicts are getting worse and worse, and the water problem is getting worse and worse. So to me, this is not a crisis. And now I want to say why I use the term water bankruptcy, because I want you to take this message from me and keep that in mind and be the messenger of this and teach this to your students and your classmates and so on, and to your grandparents and your family members and cousins and siblings and so on. We have a checking account called our surface water. We are supposed to use our checking account like and that's how we spend money. Sometimes we are short in our checking account. Sometimes, the payment is delayed, the payment is less. We receive less salary, or if you're a business person, your sales are lower, so you have less income. Your checking account is not as rich as before. You go to your saving account. Saving account is there to give you resilience. When you're short, you go to your saving account. Saving account in our case is our groundwater. So when we are short in surface water, we switch to groundwater. Groundwater also gets recharged every now and then, but the amount of recharge is limited. So if you then start using your saving account at the rate that is not more than the rate of replenishment, then you are using the resources that your grandparents gave you, the resources that you inherited from your ancestors. And as the result of that, then you have a situation where you keep increasing your consumption, or your cost keeps getting higher and higher, and you keep tapping into these resources that you had there to make you resilient, but they cannot keep you resilient forever because your business model is wrong. Now, as a business person, you have two choices. One choice is to admit that you're bankrupt. The business model is not working. You have to modify and transform the business model, the management model, and think about new ways of managing your water. Or you can insist on this problem being temporary, being a crisis that can be addressed, and communicate to your stakeholders that this is only a crisis. Wait, we can mitigate this. How? Give me more loans. Let me go to my banks and ask for more credits. Let me go to governments and promise that I can solve this problem by building one more dam and implementing another project and desalinating salt water and digging a deeper well and transferring water and recycling and reuse my wastewater. The problem is that we have been insisting on the latter instead of the former. Instead of telling people that some of these damages are permanent, there is no way we can restore these ecosystems that we have damaged. I'm not saying this because I want to normalize ecosystem damages. That I understand the risk of doing so. But I want honesty. I want to communicate properly to people that if we delay this confession any longer, if we delay this process and we communicate to people that we are still in the crisis mode and we're still in the, then all of our efforts would be focused on mitigation instead of investing in adaptation as well. Because we have to adapt to a new normal. We have to say that, yes, we destroyed these things, but I don't want more destruction. But I want to be honest and I want to be visionary and admit that. A bankrupt business owner who claims bankruptcy is brave. It's bitter, it's sad, it's embarrassing, maybe shameful to say that you're bankrupt, to admit that you're bankrupt. But it's much better to do it today than tomorrow, when you then affect more people, you take more loans, you take more I would say public resources and natural resources. You use more of those for your efforts, your vicious efforts and your vicious thinking. And that, you know, a cycle that has no, a vicious cycle that has not solved our problems. And that's the narrative that we need to change. And if we do that, you know, the water sector is a very promising sector. Now, the problem we have is that we don't know where the tipping point is. If we knew the tipping point, then the situation would have been different. And that's, you know, for bankrupt people, that's the thing. You can go on, take more loans, take more high interest loans and use more credit cards and affect people. You go to your friends and promise that this is a temporary situation, give me more money. Go to your parents and ask them to sell their properties and give you more money because your startup idea is brilliant and it's gonna work. The problem of the world is that we don't know where the tipping point is. We don't know when the whole world would collapse. We talk about, you know, boundaries, planetary boundaries, and all, you know, all of these are assumptions. They're good assumptions, but we don't know if the world would fail completely by 2050s or 2100 or longer, if humanity can survive. What proportion of humanity can survive when we will lose the small islands when they exactly go underwater? We don't know. If we knew, then our approach would have been different, right? And now we have all these, you know, I would say the fourth industrial revolution are these computational infrastructure and I would say ability that also essentially gets us, creates a little bit of, I would say, wishfulness and stupidity, because we you know, they're smart. Artificial intelligence is supposed to be smart, and it gives us a computational capacity that is unprecedented, something that we didn't have before. It's amazing that, like, you know, what we can do today that we couldn't do before, like in a matter of seconds or less, we can run big computer models, and this was unprecedented before, but it also creates a false, sometimes false understanding of your wrong understanding and false confidence. You think that you have understood the system because you have access to a lot of data and satellite and remote sensing data, but then you have people who don't understand the context. You have people from the global north that want to prescribe a solution for Indonesia without understanding what the Indonesian culture is, the norms, institutions, history, and all the things that we have had. We have civilizations in this part of the world. We have civilizations that have been formed, and people who have communities that have managed the water for thousands of years. And now, like, you know, a bunch of scientists like us coming from other parts of the world and say, like, you know, they want to transfer their solutions. And indeed, their solutions have been the contributor to a lot of problems in the global south, because they did not, you know, understand the local context. They got it wrong. They simply got it wrong. Correlation doesn't mean you know, understanding of causal relationships. There are many explanations for a complex problem, and that's why we still continue to create unintended consequences. And if we look back, we see that yes, the fourth industrial revolution is promising and it's coming with a lot of good solutions, but the previous ones all affected us also, and they all came with unintended consequences that we are dealing with every time we thought we had the solution. First industrial revolution, second industrial revolution, third industrial revolution, and all of those left us with impacts. And still, I think, I mean, I'm gonna cut now the explanation here, but we keep still thinking linearly, and we don't understand that you know, unless if we would be successful, if we solve one problem, the art and the skill here is developing a way of developing a solution without creating new problems. And it is a mission impossible in a way, because we're dealing with a complex system. So if you get a chance, just read this short article. We keep talking about sustainability, but that's very hard to achieve, and you know, but we still have to try it. And you know, I want to finish it with my story I joined, I used to be at the Imperial College London, and then I joined the political world. And water has been close to my heart. My parents worked for the water sector. I'm the only child of the parents who worked for the water sector, so I fell in love with water early on, and water was my world. And I understood that water was a complex, system, and human water systems are very complex, and I did a lot of, dynamic modeling, causal loop, diagram development, system dynamics modeling, understanding that we're dealing with systems that have bounded rationality. Uncertainty is huge in these systems. It's our power to predict their future is very limited. We have evolutionary changes, non-stationarity in these systems. But after going to the world of politics, then I realized that water is a very small component of what turns out to be a much larger complex systems that the policymakers need to deal with. And if you want to help the water world, if you want to help the environmental world, you have to understand that complexity. That's the difference between, I think, a scientist that thinks and an activist that just chants and talks about slogans without thinking deeply about how complicated it is to do these things and what is the cost of making that change. And yes, some of us talk about water, food, energy nexus and so on, but still that's not representing the whole universe of the human nature system of systems that includes economy, includes defense, includes like the other sectors, housing, this and that and that and that. And governments, as I mentioned, need to deal with those sectors as well. And then it is very hard actually to pay attention to everything, and everything is interdependent. You want to fix the housing problem, you create environmental issues, you want to protect your country and invest more in defense. Nowadays, you understand the value of defense, and many countries are going to invest more in their defense because of the state of the world. But if you do that, then you have to cut from other sectors. So how do you do that? How do you balance that? And no matter how rich your country is or how poor your country is, you need to deal with this problem, and then in the I would say the complex systems community and world, we say that sorry, there is no solution at the end of the day. Whatever you do is trade, like you're dealing with trade-offs. Until humans are on this planet, we will be dealing with trade-offs, and you want to address one issue, you would create other issues. So now this is what I learned, and this is the first article I wrote, real article I wrote after coming back to academia after the policy world. And this is the Eisenhower matrix, I would say, and then I modified this a little bit to explain. We're being told that Eisenhower was using this to prioritize his daily activities, and I thought this is how exactly how in the public policy world we set the agenda. Everything is about the relative importance and relative urgency. At the end of the day, you pay attention to what's most important relatively for the society and most urgent for your society. And if you are a society that is dealing with too many crises, then you only have a chance to deal with the issues in the extreme red part of this chart or figure, right? Unless something happens and then periodically, the attention goes higher to that issue. Now, if you look at water, I understand the value of water. I understand the urgency of water. I understand the importance of water, but the society doesn't place water as the most urgent issue and as the most important issue. This is not only the policymakers. It's also the society that doesn't think that water is the most important thing. When does the society put that, place that in the most urgent part? When? At the time of a crisis. So, and it was crazy where I came and wrote this article to say how valuable crises are for us, change our view, because in a way they encourage the societies to do something that was forbidden at other times, or it reduces the political cost of reforms for the policymakers, because yes, talking about defense was not a good idea, but now the Germans that had a certain way of investing in defense after the World War II are thinking about more investment in defense after what happened in the war of Russia and Ukraine. Or other countries in the world are thinking differently about that, like how to deal with this problem. The same applies. So at a time of a drought and a flood, we talk about water. At other times, the society needs to deal with other issues. And then if you're in a country like Indonesia, where you have drought and floods at the same time, like, or on the same year, then it's very hard, or you switch continuously between them, then it's very hard for the society. Make up your mind. Are we water short, or do we have too much extra water? Now, climate change is a little different, maybe. Environmental issues, same placement. Climate change, because the world media, and especially the global North media, has invested in it, has done a lot of campaigns, is in a better position than water, although these problems are interconnected. And it was a strategic mistake to place one problem above the other problems, because no matter what you do for water, for deforestation, for biodiversity, for your wetlands, for your marine systems, anything you do for the environment is good for the climate change fight, for everything else. Because better soil management means also carbon mitigation. Better water management means also better carbon mitigation, and so on. So it is mysterious, and you can develop a lot of conspiracy theories about this. Why we made this mistake of placing this, putting climate change above every other problem, and making that a mother of every environmental problem, whereas climate change is only one of the byproducts of unsustainable development. And when you do that, then your narrative is no longer inclusive, because your narrative doesn't capture my problems. It's not reflective of my problems here in the world. Wherever, in this place on the planet, I'm dealing with air pollution. I want you to talk about air pollution. And if you do something about my air pollution problem, you were addressing the climate change problem as well. If you're doing something about of the West hit Italy and the United States, it became the problem of the globe. And then the narratives changed. Then we stopped talking about climate change. Then we stopped all the environmental negotiations. We didn't talk about dedicated agency for water. Many governments take it for granted. We are hosted by the government of Canada. Canada last year created a new water agency, federal water agency. Many countries did not think that water is a major issue. Still, water is an untold story globally. The water agenda is mainly focused on the wash problems, first stage of development, building water infrastructure for the poor, for the vulnerable, and that's something we should do. But we do have no solution for water bankruptcy. We don't have any solution that is useful. We keep talking about integrated water resources management. That is theoretical. We don't have a real solution for those farmers who would go bankrupt. We don't have a solution that is a political, from the political economy standpoint, is a real solution. And that's why we are not ready and equipped with dealing with this problem and solving this problem. And only by I think doing a better job in raising the profile through close interaction with the media, scientists and media hand in hand with us at the United Nations University, which can change this profile. We can tell those stories. And then, guess what? We don't have any shortage of sad stories that I told you. A lot of those, I highlighted a lot of those today. We also need success stories. We need to create hope. And the success stories are, again, come out of your connections with the communities, with the local communities, with those who have been successful. And if then through an equal platform, we can do an exchange. We can also, the Global South can also teach the Global North about their problems. Indigenous communities in some of the Global North countries are not doing well. We need to learn from the Global South and how they have handled, what the lessons learned were, and what the success stories were. Innovations coming from the Global South. We need those today more than before, and I think, I congratulate you. I've been here for, I would say, a very short visit, but already I'm impressed about what you're doing, how much you're doing, and what you can do for the world. I thank you for your contributions, and once again, say congratulations for all your accomplishments, and thank you for the invitation on behalf of myself and the United Nations family.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kaveh Madani, who has delivered a lecture. And yeah, the most important point that I capture, that we should be aware that the status of the water problem is not a crisis anymore. This has been bankruptcy. Bankruptcy means that something like we need a really urgent measure and strategic measure that can be implemented very quickly. So this is what I understood. I mean, like, because economy as well, because as we also see in the figures before, that how water really important for the industrial sector, for agriculture or something like that. And perhaps also this about the water problems, we may also understand that there is a bias, or I would say we are now about the water diamond paradox, which makes water has no value in the eyes of the people, but it is actually create the economy. It is very important for the economy. So there are some I would say cognitive bias in how we perceive about water, and maybe this can be also shape our strategy or our efforts in mitigating or in solving the water problems. So I mean, this is kind of not summary, but just kind of how I translate the lecture that delivered by Prof. Kaveh. And I would like to invite, we still have a few minutes before the end of the session, and I would like to invite questions or opinions from our audience here, and also from our audience at the Zoom meeting. So maybe if you have something in mind that you would like to share or you would like to ask in more detail. And before I mean, like, waiting for this, I have something in mind actually. As you mentioned that this bankruptcy, in terms of the global water bankruptcy, it happens due to the management, if I understood correctly, due to the business model. I mean, like
main cause, but at the same time we have the catalysts like climate change that make the situation worse,
right?
And pandemic and wars. And those disruptions. Today, but water problems are very diverse from every location to another. We were in a meeting yesterday with all the channels of RRI, 69 stations across the nation, and we had locals telling us about their problems. From one place that water pollution was the problem, and another place declining groundwater level, and all of those cannot be solved with the same solution. Right, so then first thing is to understand that if you are dealing with a diverse problem, then you cannot have a solution that fits all problems. First thing. Second is to understand that if you're dealing with a complex setting, then you cannot solve that problem by one magic solution. So you have to have multiple entries to that problem. That means that you need to adopt a portfolio approach. A portfolio approach would include technology. Let's say at some place, despite the environmental impacts of a reservoir, we decide that having a reservoir still is the best solution, or digging a well, or desalinating water, and so on. The problem is when you blindly just think that your solution should be technological. Only engineering becomes your solution, or you think that the problem is only a policy problem and only you can accomplish essentially your mission by a solution that is a policy solution. So you need a portfolio solution that mixes different solutions that are technological and policy, and they are at the different scales. We talked about local, from local to global. Don't expect the world at the global level to come and solve your problem. That's a mistake. That's vicious. It's not going to happen. Did it happen in other cases? I remember, some countries where people were asking, like the WHO, to come and solve the pandemic, or save them from their governments because they were thinking their governments were acting badly. That's not the reality of the world. Still, we need to have the actors come in together and function, creating a functional mechanism to implement solutions that are a different scale. At the global level, of course, we need a change, and we need governments to be more vocal, scientists to be more vocal, and tell the stories and provide solutions. But we also need to put a political economy lens on and understand why we have some of these environmental problems and water problems. Let's start with the environmental issues. Consumerism remains as one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cause of environmental problems. Okay? Why? Because the world's economic growth is measured based on GDPs. And what does GDP reflect? Production. So to have better production, increased production, which means more jobs, which means more resources, more income, more opportunities for exports and so on, labor opportunity, employments and so on, and governments like that. To increase your production, you need increased consumption as well, otherwise you go bankrupt. So then how do you solve this issue? That if you reduce consumption, then you're hurting GDPs. And that's the economic model that we have set up. Institutions have been set up like that. Now we talk about circular economy and so on, and that is good, but I would say the engine of the world has been set up like that. You cannot transform that overnight. There is no way. You got to understand that the problems that we are dealing with today have been created by the institutions that we expect them to solve those problems. Understand that reality, and then don't be delusional. So understand that we have to deal with this issue, that at the same time that we have to encourage the governments to think about health, environment, and so on, still GDP is a major driver of many decisions, and then our systems, people need employments. But if you put the political economy lens on, then you realize that it's not strategically smart to export cheap food to the global north and import expensive products. And 70% of the world's water is in the hands of farmers, mostly poor. They sell, we're counting on Africa to feed the world. Africa's resources. We're, critical minerals, the same things. We export critical minerals, lithium and other things, to other countries. They don't get exposed to the pollution, leftover pollution, right? They're not exposed. Yes, they drive. A lot of countries drive their EVs and celebrate their environmental success, but the pollution is at the source. And the pollution would be at the end of the game also the supply chain, and we don't have any solution for that yet. So if we put the political economy lens on, we understand why the water is strategically being used and why my government is not able to deal with this problem. Am I able to ask the farmers, really to change their habits? Can I remove subsidies? Because our theoretical scientists who have never seen the reality of the world just say remove subsidies, remove subsidies. It's impossible. If they put you in the if you're in their shoes, you're doing the same thing. But that means that we have to create alternative modes of livelihoods. We have to go toward industrialization and modernization, and then service products, and then you would answer this question: is it better for me strategically to produce coffee here, or invest in sustainable tourism, right? Service or products where I'm losing my fossil water, and then they're eating it. If the world prices food at its right price, that is reflective of the value of our natural resources and labor of the global south, the world goes bankrupt. So there is no political motive to raise the food price. And if you do that, the world will no longer be stable. So that reality is there, and this inequality in the trades is also a reality there. Let's understand that, appreciate that. And if you're talking about diversification and success stories, if you look at, for example, stories of Israel in water management is known to be better than many other countries, especially in the Middle East, but in dry areas. Technology has been a good element of that, recycling, reuse, desalination, and so on. But what has made Israel more successful and people don't talk about much, is decoupling their economy from water. So that means reduce the reliance of your economy on your natural resources on water. If you are relying on mining for creating jobs, then that means that if you're at the time of inflation, you mine more, and you even relax the environmental regulations because you want jobs. You don't want to create unemployment. A country like mine, Iran, under sanctions, would just burn more resources to survive. That means more pollution. That means more natural resources exhaustion. And then unless they take the country out of this. So you can see that the interrelationship of economy, development decisions, and so on. And then the development path must be created in a way that the pressure on the economy is reduced. It's not an easy thing, but that's the transformation we got to be after at the top level.
Interesting. So, is there any questions before?
Here on our left.
Oh, Project.
Just a question to Professor Madani. You talked about public awareness, you talked about problems, but is there a political will at the policy level? Because parallel to public awareness, you need to increase the awareness of politicians, policymakers, regulators. Is there a will to do that? And who is handling this campaign to at least invite policymakers, regulators to think about this global issue, global problem, and address that? Of course, then the strategy comes in. What is the world strategy? There are successful examples, as you mentioned, but this crisis will kill all societies.
Very good, smart question. I don't think that political will is there. We have a chicken and egg problem. For a society to pay more attention to environmental issues or water issues, we have to have the policymakers who are willing to invest in raising public awareness and education. And to have the policymakers who care more about the water and environmental issues and so on, we need a society that cares about those issues. Because even in dictatorships, still the policymakers are sensitive to the issues that the society cares about. Remember that relative importance, relative urgency chart. That's why I say that we need the crises, actually, the crises that would not knock us out completely, but they create an opportunity for thinking differently, and they reduce the political cost of reforms. In many societies, policymakers are not, most societies, I would say, policymakers are not dumb. They know these problems exist. But strategically, it is better for them to ignore these problems or dismiss these problems because you have a limited bandwidth and you have limited resources and you have limited time. You're in office for 4 years, and in that 4 years, it's much better, and the society rewards you more if you create cheap housing than expensive environment. They reward you more if you do something that makes everything cheap and relax the regulations and permits and so on, than something that has no tangible impact in the there. But at the same time, we are seeing that the next generation, a lot of investments are going into environmental campaigns. The problem now we have here is that the scientists also have not interacted with the media or those who are funding these campaigns on equal foot. So then the narratives have got biased stories that are not reflective of the South. And then as a scientist, instead of fighting back and say, no, this problem is not necessarily a climate change product. I don't know, I don't have the evidence. But today there is a wildfire in Los Angeles, and I get a call from media to talk about it. I go on live TV and say this is a reflection of climate change because I want attention. I want to use any opportunity I get to get attention for something I've been waiting for or fighting for. And then that creates a reinforcing loop that makes the narrative more biased toward a topic that is not necessarily even scientifically valid, but we become opportunists in a way to use that opportunity to get the attention. I think that's the thing that we need to change. So the will can be created, yeah, and then the scientists are also there to be the members of this fight, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to talk in an unbiased way. And they're afraid of not attention. We were talking about this. We have scientists who are very good in publishing the best papers in the best journals of the field, but they don't get media attention. They're never invited to the policy circles, and that's one thing we should change. At least we are ready. You are ready. This partnership has been created with the same objective. And I'm sure there would be governments that would be willing to sponsor. UN agencies also would appreciate this. And once we show how this transformation and change can be facilitated, then there would be supporters. Sometimes, when you innovate, you have to also explain the value of the good that you have produced.
Yeah, there isn't a questions in the online participants, but I would like to address one. Maybe Ibu Weni, you can later follow up about it, because we in Indonesia we have what we call can be kind of institute as well that nurture the policymaker and leaders of the governments. We call it Lembaga Ketahanan Nasional, Lemhanas, ya. Lemhanas. So this Lemhanas, so all of the leaders of Indonesian, they should be educated, trained at that institute. And this what I understood about the content that they trained is not only related to administrative, but they also bring the issue on the environmental issue and something. Prof. Arif Satria was also invited as a lecturer at that institute. So RRI could be the good person in charge, I think, to connect to Lemhanas, so that we can bring also these narratives on water, for example, and other environmental problems, then how we can make it more sound at the policy making level, and also, of course, at the national level. I think this is one of the things that I'm thinking is very strategic, that we should build that relationship. And there is another question, maybe before. I think this would be like the we end up. So there are you can read it?
Yes, so I can read Indonesia's bottled water. It's over there.
Right.
It's here, the screen.
Oh yeah, but there are three actually. There are three coming. So I mean, maybe you can just wrap up.
Yeah. So Indonesia's bottled water industry is growing. Is this happening in other parts of the world as well? Yes, it is happening in many parts of the world, and there are several reasons. Indeed, our institute published a report in 2023 discussing this issue and looking at the trends. There are multiple drivers here. And of course, this comes with a lot of injustice and environmental implications, especially the plastic pollution, but also some other health-related risks, because bottled water in many countries are not properly regulated. Many countries, the standards are lower than tap water, and tap water is much cleaner. But the trends are striking in some places. One of the reasons for this is, we just talked about economic motives. It's much, and without, disregarding the brand of this bottled water that is in my hands.
This is our brand actually.
Okay, so, but if there are sales involved, if this water comes through your tap, it's much cheaper than if it's bottled and it's sold. So as easy as it sounds, you can make much more money if you put water into a bottle. And indeed, we have this in the North American market, that when you do the investigation, you see that they're just putting it in the, from a resource that is not as clean, or just is the tap water, and they put it, and then they add some taste or something, or they don't. And the moment it becomes a bottled water, it becomes expensive, and there's a perception, and that is cleaner, and people go for it. In Canada, many years ago, actually, there was a study suggesting that, and there's an inverse correlation or relationship between the education level and the use of tap water. The more uneducated you are, the more tap water the more bottled water you use, because you don't understand that tap water might be even better, healthier, and so on. And in many parts in the United States, that's true. But you go to other places, it is different. In many countries, this even became a kind of a justification for escaping. Like the public sector, now that the tap water the bottled water industry is there, the governments don't make enough investments in fixing the public sector, public water sector, in making investments there, because somehow this problem has been solved. So the health and sanitation issue has been solved. There are values in exports. You can export. So export is a big motive in this. You can export across a nation, within a nation, but also across borders. So that's another motive. So there are economic motives. There are management issues. I'm not going to comment on Indonesia, and I'm not saying this is about Indonesia, but in some countries, corruption issues are involved. Some of those who are in charge of or take advantage or benefit from the bottled water industry have close relations with governments. So corruption is also a driver there, and people get away with creating these, even taking water from the locals. We have had this, even some major, well-known, famous European or North American companies going to places in the developing world, essentially getting control over their local resources, surface water and groundwater, and then putting that water into their bottles and beverages and selling it to others, and while the locals have no access to water. So that's also a major issue, which it's a major injustice issue here. This is unaffordable still for a lot of people, the population. We also have another issue related to that, uneducated, the thing that I mentioned about some people not knowing about the quality of tap water. And again, remember that many countries still don't have clean tap water coverage for every member of the population. So Indonesia included. But we have also countries that have clean tap water. Still, people are switching to bottled water because bottled water is also, somehow comes across as fashionable. So in some countries now, this is forbidden. Indeed, when I was the deputy I was the deputy head of Iran's Department of Environment, we banned bottled water in the department. And then some people were asking me, why do you do that? So what do we do? And I was saying like this, our tap water, if you're saying this is clean, at the government employees, we have to drink this. And then they were saying, okay, what do we do with our international guests? And it was like, these international guests, actually many of them back home, they drink tap water, so not a problem. But somehow this becomes, fashionable, and people are even willing to spend more on certain brands. That this is like a French like bottled water. Like, okay, what? Like, so it might be even your own water a French company has put it in a bottle and selling it to you. So it has become a fashionable thing, but it's the thing is changing. A few years ago, I was at Yale teaching, and I checked in my classroom, everyone had, just bottles that were, recyclable refill, right? So they were not, none of them was using bottled water. So the trend is also changing. Like, we see this with diets, right? The obese nations started championing for vegetarian diet and salads and vegan diets and so on, saying this is healthy, this is good. So we are now valuing the vegetarian diet and the healthy nutrition and so on. So the same trend is there. So societies that can bypass that stage can do a better job, and you have to encourage governments to change that. But yes, unfortunately, this is a problem we are having. There are some benefits because, let's say, if you have a crisis, you have an emergency earthquake or something. You have to. This is the way to transport water. If you're in a war zone, this is the way to transport water. And deliver water, but in some other cases, this is not the most efficient and the cleanest. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kaveh Madani. It's very interesting and insightful. Unfortunately, because of the time, we cannot continue with the discussion, and we can also take the questions from the other online participants. But I do hope that you gain insight, ideas. Yeah, of course, this discourse on water, although Indonesian, I mean, like, we are, particularly Bogor, we are rainy city, so much water, but like, still, because the problem is how we can provide accessible and affordable water with the quality, good quality, and then I think these are still also a problem for Indonesia. Although we have a lot of water resources, but clean water is something like a different thing than water availability, of course. And yeah, I will not make any conclusion of this guest lecture, but I do hope that you get more information or insights from this discussion.
And let me also thank all those people who were online, and I apologize for not being able to answer all questions. I hope we have a chance of interactions in the future, and I'm thankful to those who participated online and here, of course.
So I think we are now at the end of the